Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Nishit Kumar bringing glimpses of major developments of the day from across the globe. The headlines. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi calls for a comprehensive reform of the United Nations to fight challenges of today. India hits back at Pakistan for fabricating false narrative on Jammu and Kashmir at the UN. New Delhi impeaching to continue maintaining dialogue for easing the current situation in border areas. United States imposes a range of sanctions and restrictions on 27 Iranian and Iranian-linked officials and entities. And in sports, world number 1 Novak Djokovic win the men's singles event in the Italian Open tennis. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi on Monday called on members of the United Nations to pledge for reform within the world body and stressed the need for reform multilateralism. He was addressing the virtual edition of a special General Assembly session to mark the 75th anniversary of the world body.
It's a far-reaching declaration that we are adopting today acknowledges that work still needs to be done in preventing conflict, in ensuring development, in addressing climate change, in reducing inequality, and in leveraging digital technologies. The declaration also acknowledges the need for reform of the United Nations itself. We cannot fight today's challenges with outdated structure. Without comprehensive reforms, the UN faces a crisis of confidence.
Prime Minister Modi also described how, as a founding signatory of the UN Charter, India was part of that noble vision.
As a founding signatory of the UN Charter, India was part of that noble vision. It reflected India's own philosophy of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. We see all creation as a family.
For the first time in its 75-year history, all events at the UN will be held virtually in wake of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Heads of states and governments will not be travelling to New York for the General Assembly session. In another development at the UN, India hit back at Pakistan for raising the Jammu and Kashmir issue during the high-level meeting to commemorate the world body's 75th anniversary. India's right of reply came after Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi raked up the issue. The First Secretary of India at the UN termed Qureshi's speech as a never-ending fabricative narrative about the internal affairs of India.
We reject the malicious reference made to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, which is an integral part of India. If there is an item that is unfinished on the agenda of the UN, it is that of tackling the scourge of terrorism. Pakistan is a country which is globally recognized as the epicenter of terrorism, which by its own admission harbors and trains terrorists and hails them as martyrs and consistently persecutes its ethnic and religious minorities. It would do well to turn its attention inwards to immediately addressing these pressing concerns instead of diverting attention from them by misusing UN platforms.
The Indian Ministry of External Affairs summoned a senior official of the Pakistan High Commission on Monday. A strong protest was lodged over yet another incident of an alleged abduction of a Sikh girl in Pakistan's Punjab province. The Sikh community gathered in protest in front of the Pakistan High Commission in New Delhi. In a recent report, U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, noted that young women of Hindu, Christian and Sikh communities in Pakistan are being kidnapped and forcibly converted to Islam. It adds that over 1,000 women are forcibly converted to Islam each year. The local police is often accused of complicity in these cases. Not only this, they fail to investigate them properly and bring the perpetrators of crime to justice. India and China held the 6th round of Corps Commander-level talks on Monday. The two sides exchanged in-depth views on easing the current situation in the border areas. India insisted that China should move back to the positions which existed before April-May 2020 in the eastern Ladakh sector. These talks were held in the backdrop of the 5-point consensus on the current situation arrived at the meeting of both the foreign ministers in Moscow on the 10th of September. A joint statement said that the Indian and Chinese militaries agreed to strengthen communication on the ground and avoid misunderstandings and misjudgments. Both sides would stop sending more troops to frontline, refrain from unilaterally changing the situation on the ground, take practical measures to properly solve problems and jointly safeguard peace in the border areas. The 7th round of military commander meeting would be held as soon as possible. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. United States imposed a range of sanctions and restrictions on 27 Iranian and Iranian-linked officials and entities. The list includes Iran's Defense Ministry and its Atomic Energy Organization. The move came after an effort to reimpose UN sanctions on Tehran was largely rejected by other members of the United Nations. US President Donald Trump said he is imposing sanctions on Iranians for violating a UN arms embargo. He demanded its enforcement by US allies, who earlier disputed that he has any such authority. Mr. Trump further said his actions sent a clear message to the Iranian regime and those in the international community who refuse to stand up to Iran. India and Nepal on Tuesday launched a dedicated website on the Government of India-assisted post-earthquake reconstruction projects in the education sector in Nepal. Indian Ambassador to Nepal, Vinay M. Quatra, and Sushil Gewali, CEO of Nepal's National Reconstruction Authority, oversaw the launch. The website would be available in both English and Nepali versions. The devastating earthquake of 2015 that shook the Himalayan nation of Nepal had claimed nearly 10,000 lives, injuring thousands and displaced over 500,000 people. Post the earthquake, the Indian government had committed $1 billion for the reconstruction of Nepal in form of grant and line of credit. A steady progress has been recorded under this commitment from the Government of India since then. Indian Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal on Tuesday emphasized on the role of small traders, India's data sovereignty and economic reforms. He addressed virtually the third edition of G20 Trade and Investments Ministries meet, which began on Sunday. In a move to help slow the spread of coronavirus in the country, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has asked people to work from home as far as possible. Johnson on Tuesday announced a range of new restrictions, including a requirement for pubs, restaurants and other venues in England to close between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. However, he stopped short of announcing another full lockdown and said further action could be taken if the disease was not suppressed. Now, let us take a look at the coronavirus updates from around the world. According to WHO data, a record number of 2 million COVID-19 cases have been registered in the past week. The number of infected cases has crossed 31.13 million worldwide. An increase in the weekly case incidence rate was reported across the regions in the last 7 days, except for Africa. The two Americas remain the worst hit regions and accounted for over 38% of all new cases reported over the past week. With a 27% increase, Europe showed the greatest increment in the number of fatalities in the past week as compared to the previous week. Stock markets in Asia suffered on Tuesday from the fallout from UK and the US investors worried about a rise in coronavirus cases. Meanwhile, India has recorded a high single recoveries successively during the last 3 days. More than 90,000 COVID-19 patients have been cured every single day, with about 4.5 million recoveries so far. This has positioned India as the leading country globally with maximum number of recovered cases, with its recovery rate having crossed 80%. Now, moving on to sports. In tennis, world number one Novak Djokovic won a record 36th Masters title by beating Diego Schwartzman in the Italian Open at Rome last night. The Indian Premier League cricket, Rajasthan Royals posted a mammoth 216 for 7 wickets in the stipulated 20 overs. In its reply, Chennai Super Kings had scored 77 for 4 wickets in 9 overs as per the latest updates. India is celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Jan, by artists from Laos. And with that, we end this bulletin. See you at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.